Hello viewers, so I've just survived my first ever UCI gravel event. Just about. It was a close call at times, but I got around in mostly one piece. And I definitely learned a few lessons and made some mistakes along the way, which I'll share in today's video. And also we're here for some actual pros and more experienced gravel cyclists about the tips and wisdom they can share with us all today, which is especially important if you are doing your first ever gravel race, event or sportive. Better to learn from other people's mistakes than make them yourself. So before we hear from the pros, let me share my experience from riding the Gralic in Scotland at the weekend and the mistakes I made and the tips I would share with you based on my experience. The first one is don't start too fast. I made the mistake of getting caught up in the race for the first corner, the first climb, and going way harder than I had planned. I'm a sucker for getting carried away at the start of a race. And it was made especially tough because we weren't able to warm up before the race. So going from standstill to full gas in a matter of seconds was very tough on my old body. So I would recommend a warm-up before the race or event if you can, which wasn't available at the Gralic because we had to line up in our age pens about 45 minutes before the start. So we stood around for ages with cold legs. So that made it really tough. So given that cold start, I should have gone for a slightly more relaxed start. But I know the importance of getting a good start, not getting held up in traffic in the sort of pinch points through town and into the first climb. And my aim was to get a good start and then provide some sliding space on the first climb, which I definitely did slide. I slid a long way back on that first climb as my body was screaming at me, my heart rate was through the roof, and my glutes were shouting at me very loudly because of what I was asking from them from a cold start. So unless you're racing to win, which I wasn't, and you are just racing to finish, maybe don't be so caught up in the start line pandemonium and ride to your own heart rate, ride to power if you have a power meter on your bike, and try and pace yourself better than I did on the first climb. My other big mistake, the biggest one I regret, is going higher on the tyre pressures than I would normally do. I was freaked out by people puncturing on the recon and my own experience of the recon and realising the gravel in Scotland, in this area of Scotland, is way tougher and way harder than anywhere I experienced in my life. So to minimise the risk of puncturing, even running tubeless, because even with no inner tube to pinch, with tubeless you can still pinch the tyre sidewalls between a rock and a rim, and it's also damaging the rims to be conscious about as well. So I went higher on the tyre pressures to minimise the risk of a failure, but in doing so I minimised the amount the tyre can deform on the rough ground and minimise how much suspension I effectively had, and my arms just couldn't cope with the relentless pounding over 4 hours of racing. So I should have stuck to my guns and stuck to the low pressures I know work for me and relied on my faith in my equipment choices on the day and not be deterred by what's happening around me on the day before the race. Those then are the mistakes I made and the tips I take away from my first ever UCI gravel race. But now let's hear from some actual gravel pros who did much better in the race than I did, and some much more experienced and seasoned gravel riders about the tips and wisdom they can share with us in today's video.
I would definitely say make sure to take care of your equipment in this race especially because it's pretty rocky, it's pretty chunky out there, and a lot of people's races ended last year, like mine last year ended just with like a big hit, and I just was using wheels that weren't strong enough.
So you broke your wheels?
I broke my front wheel.
Okay.
So I kind of had to limp home the last 15K or so, and my race is done. Like I just stopped thinking I had a flat, and I stopped, and sealant was coming through the rim. So that was pretty bad. But yeah, I would say have your equipment dialed, and when in doubt, or there's a classic saying in Canada at least, like it's better to be looking at it than looking for it. So it's better to have this race like a bit wider tires, having foam inserts, a little bit lower pressure. Just because if you're like with road, everyone's nickeling and diming, like, oh, I have to have these aero socks, I have to have this helmet's faster than this helmet. Where in gravel it's like, well, we're gonna average 30 odd tomorrow, and it's half up, half down, and like the aerodynamics on a downhill are less important, and then uphill you're going 20K an hour, and it's better just to have maybe a couple more watts here and there, but have like a bike you can trust, I think is really key. And then for nutrition, it's just keep getting it in. I'm going to use the Castelli has like a hydro pack for the back, so last year there was bottles being jettisoned all over the course on some of the rockier downhills, so I just have the hydro bag. So I'm like, okay, got the foam inserts, I got the wide tires, all the liquid I need is on my back. So if I lose a bottle, it's like, okay, I have enough water, the bare minimum on my back to get me through the whole race. Especially because Growlithe, they're very nature conscious and they don't want people driving all over in the national park here. So it's good to just make sure you have the stuff you need at the start, have a bike you can trust, and not risk it, because it's a long way to come up here to Scotland and run too narrow of tires or road pedals or something where it's like, oh, that broke, my race is done, my day's done. So that would be my advice: is play it safe for food and for equipment.
We're here at the Gralloch.
Yes.
What one bit of advice would you give to somebody doing their first gravel event, whether racing or just riding for fun? Is there one bit of advice that you would offer them, or mistakes to avoid? Bike setup or nutrition or pacing? What's the thing?
Can I give two?
You give two, yeah? Of course you can.
Take a lot of salt on board, because you, especially like it's probably about 50 degrees right now. You will lose so much salt. Get salt tablets in you. I think that's a thing that a lot of people just don't do correctly anyway when they're hydrating. Is like, you need salt as well as water to be able to hydrate. So take on salt. My second one would be put the biggest tyres you can on your bike, because like in terms of comfort, it makes a massive difference. A third one, use a tyre pressure calculator. SRAM do one, Wolftooth do one. They are really good at giving you an idea of what kind of pressures you should be running, and it'll probably come out a lot lower than you think, especially if you're coming from more of a road background. But trust the process, take a little bit out every time, and the confidence it will give you is unbelievable. I mean, I did the Flanders Sportief a month or so ago, and I ran 32s on a Argon 18 Krypton, which is their like all-road bike, and I ran 30 psi.
Wow, okay, that's low.
Yeah, and I had a great time. And on this, I'm running 24. I mean, I just went, that feels about right. That'll do. I did check it.
Yeah.
About 2 days ago.
But lower is better generally.
Lower is generally
Don't be scared
better.
of going low.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people are quite nervous about that, but it will really change your experience a lot, I think, and it'll give you a lot more confidence, especially descending some of the rough stuff. It really does change that.
Hi, I'm Toby Perry and I'm from Ashford, Kent.
And what bit of advice would you give to somebody doing gravel for the first time?
I'd say just be confident and trust your bike, because it can do a lot more than you think.
That's simple.
Yeah, just literally that. Everyone gets really nervous and twitchy, and when you tense up is when you crash and have problems. So as long as you're calm, you end up being fine.
What's your view on like bike setup, equipment choices, gearing, tyres?
Slightly wider tyres is always just nice for extra bit of grip and that, and just gives it extra bit of comfort. So yeah, it fits like biggest tyres you can fit on your bike normally, and see what you enjoy.
Just checking everything's tight, and the amount of people I see with like just their shoe cleats that come loose after 2 hours of gravel, and I've had it happen to me where my cleat and I've lost the cleat bolt. So just checking everything's at the right torque, the right settings, and that's how I can only say to people, prepare your bike. Like, just don't just think, oh yeah, it's tyres and everything else. It's everything.
My biggest tip would be improving your bike handling skills, and I think this is the problem that most riders have when they're doing their first gravel event. It's not like road where you can just pick any line. You need to look through the corners, pick your lines very carefully, basically hit the apex and then exit the corners. And yeah, always looking ahead of you if there's any obstacles coming up, such as large rocks. You don't want to be hitting those. So yeah, just improving your confidence on the bike as much as possible. I think that would be just a general really good tip that a lot of people can improve on.
So there we are. Hopefully some useful tips and advice if you are doing your first gravel event. And if you are, let us know what event you're doing by dropping a comment down below. And if you are watching this and you have done some gravel events and you feel there's some advice and tips that were missed in today's video, then feel free to drop a comment down below. But that's all for today. I'll see you again very soon. Thank you so much for watching.